My wife cheated with our business partner, and now he's claiming half of our $1.2 million estate. It's a nightmare I never saw coming, especially after she convinced me to sign over $200, $0 in property just weeks before she betrayed me. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Emily, cheated on me with our business partner, Jason, and now he's claiming half of our estate. The whole thing feels like some twisted nightmare I can't wake up from. We're talking about a $1.2 million estate, and he's demanding his cut, all because Emily decided to screw around behind my back. It's a mess I never saw coming, especially after she convinced me to sign over $200, $0 worth of property just a few weeks before she started this whole betrayal. I want to get this out in the open, not just for myself, but for anyone who's ever been blindsided by the person they trusted the most. Emily and I had been together for over 10 years. We built a decent life, ran a successful business together, my construction company, and things seemed solid. She was always a little bitchy, quick to lie, and had a sharp tongue, but I thought that was just her personality. She was smart, attractive, and charming when she wanted to be. We had a lot of money, a big house, luxury cars, and a future I thought was secure. I mean, I wasn't perfect, who is? But I believed we had a real partnership, or at least I did until about 3 months ago when everything started to crack. It started with small things, missed calls, late nights, secretive texts. I noticed Emily acting weird, more on edge than usual. She was suddenly more interested in her phone, hiding it when I walked into the room. She'd snap at me for no reason, accuse me of not trusting her, and brush off any questions I had. I figured maybe she was just stressed with work or something. But then I started noticing strange charges on our credit card, things I didn't recognize, dinners at weird restaurants, and a few hotel charges. I brushed it off at first, telling myself I was just being paranoid, but deep down I knew something was off. One night I decided to check her phone when she was in the shower. I know, trust is supposed to be sacred, but I was desperate for answers. What I found made my stomach drop. There were messages, explicit texts, photos of her and Jason in bed. The way she talked about him, how she said she was tired of me, how she wanted something more exciting. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I loved, was cheating on me with our business partner, someone I trusted implicitly. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. My world was crashing down in that moment. The worst part: she lied to my face when I confronted her. I remember standing there, holding her phone, trembling with rage and hurt. She looked me dead in the eyes and told me it was all a misunderstanding, that Jason was just a friend, that I was overreacting. She said she was exhausted from work, that I was paranoid and jealous. But I knew better. The evidence was right there. I could see the lies in her eyes. She'd always been good at lying, but this time her face betrayed her. It was like she thought she could talk her way out of it, like her words could erase what I'd seen. That moment changed everything. I felt a mixture of shock, anger, and heartbreak all at once. I'd trusted her for so long, and now I was questioning everything. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this, especially after all we'd built? I kept replaying the scenes in my head, her sneaking around, the fake smiles, her lies, and I realized I couldn't keep living in this illusion. I was furious, but also deeply hurt. I wondered if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been blind or just too trusting. The betrayal cut so deep. I didn't know how I was going to move forward, but I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with this, especially not without consequences. After the initial shock wore off, I started to see the full scope of what I was dealing with. Emily's lies weren't just about the affair. They were about control, manipulation, and a calculated plan to take everything I had worked for. That's when I started digging deeper, trying to understand how far she'd gone, what she'd hidden, and how she planned to cover her tracks. The first thing I did was go through our financial records. It was a mess of small transactions, but I caught a few things that didn't add up. Emily had been funneling money into secret accounts, accounts I didn't even know existed. I found out she'd been transferring chunks of money to Jason's personal account over the last few months, right under my nose. That's when I realized this wasn't just a fling. It was a full-blown scheme to drain us, maybe even to take everything. The more I looked, the more certain I became that she'd been planning this for a while. She always had a way of spinning stories, though. When I confronted her again, she tried to paint herself as the victim. "You don't understand, Mike," she said, voice dripping with fake concern. "Jason and I were just friends. I was stressed and I made a mistake. It meant nothing. You're overreacting." She looked me right in the eyes, trying to make me doubt myself like I was the crazy one. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Her excuses sounded hollow, and I could see her desperation. She knew I was onto her, and she was doing everything she could to keep me from discovering the truth. I also found out she'd been secretly working on a plan to sign over some of our property, our biggest assets, just weeks before I caught her cheating. I remember sitting at the dining room table one night, going through the documents she'd hidden in her drawer. She convinced me to sign over a $200, $0 property, claiming it was necessary for some investment opportunity. She lied about everything, said it was a good deal, that it would help us grow our wealth. But I now see it was part of her plan to secure her future with Jason. She was lining her pockets and I was just an afterthought. That realization made my blood boil. I felt so stupid for trusting her. How could she do this to us? And the worst part, I knew I had to act fast. If she was willing to cheat and lie so openly, she'd do anything to keep her secrets safe. I started to think about my options, whether I should confront her publicly, lawyer up, or just cut her out entirely. Every step I took was filled with anger and a sense of betrayal. I was furious that she'd used me, my trust, and our shared life as a pawn in her game. But what really pushed me over the edge was realizing Jason was also involved in our business dealings. I'd always considered him a close partner, someone I trusted. Now I see he was just another snake in the grass, trying to take a piece of what I'd built. The thought that he might get half of our estate, which I'd worked so hard for, made me sick. All because Emily decided to cheat on me and scheme behind my back. I knew I had to do something to stop her, to protect what's mine, and to make her pay for the pain she caused. That's when I started to formulate my plan. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. No, I was going to fight back, expose her lies, and take control of this mess. I wasn't sure yet exactly how I was going to do it, but I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And I definitely wasn't going to let her or Jason get away with it. I'd be damned if I let her ruin everything I'd worked for without a fight. I spent the next few days buried in legal documents, bank statements, and trying to piece together exactly how deep Emily's scheme went. I knew I couldn't confront her again without everything lined up perfectly. I needed a plan, something precise, calculated. I also knew I had to get ahead of her before she could do any more damage. She was quick, manipulative, and completely convinced she could lie her way out of everything. One night I caught her in another lie. She'd been acting more nervous than usual, avoiding certain questions about our finances, and acting overly defensive whenever I brought up the topic of the estate or her recent trips. I decided to test her. I told her I'd found some irregularities in our accounts, that I was talking to a lawyer, and that I was considering taking legal action. She froze for a moment, then started to cry, insisting she was innocent, that I was overreacting, that I was paranoid. She said, "Mike, I love you. I would never do anything to hurt you. You're just jealous because Jason and I are close, that's all." That's when I knew I had her cornered, and she knew it too. I reached out to a lawyer I knew and trusted, someone who specialized in family and business law. We talked through the situation, and he confirmed what I already suspected. Emily's actions could be grounds for a legal injunction to freeze her assets and prevent her from transferring any more money or property. We also discussed how to approach the situation to protect my rights, especially considering Jason's claims on our estate. It was clear to me now that this wasn't just about a cheating wife. It was a full-on attempt to steal from me, and I needed to fight smart. Meanwhile, Emily kept up her act, acting innocent, crying, begging me to believe her. She insisted her affair with Jason was just a mistake, that she never wanted to hurt me, that she was just stressed and lonely. She threw in every excuse in the book, saying the sex was just a one-time thing, that Jason was just a good friend, that she'd stop everything if I just forgave her. But her words felt hollow, rehearsed. I saw through her lies now. She was desperate to keep her secrets, desperate to keep her grip on the money in the life she'd been planning with Jason all along. I also found out that Jason had been pressuring her to get her to sign some documents, papers that transferred ownership of a substantial part of our estate into his name. I don't know exactly how far he'd gone, but I had a feeling he'd been trying to secure his share for months. That's when I realized I had to act fast before they could finalize anything. I decided to dig into our legal options and prepare to confront them both head-on. I wasn't going to let this slide, not after everything I'd discovered. In the meantime, I started secretly recording some of Emily's conversations. She was slipping up, saying things that made her sound guilty. I kept my cool, pretending everything was normal, but behind the scenes I was gathering evidence. I wanted to have everything documented, proof of her lies, her manipulations, her attempts to steal from me. I knew once I had enough, I could go to the authorities, file for a court injunction, and stop her from transferring any more assets. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not without a fight. The hardest part was seeing her like this, so bitchy, so full of lies, so convinced she could manipulate me into believing her sob stories. I felt so betrayed, so angry, and honestly, I was starting to feel numb. How did I get here? How did the woman I loved turn into someone so cold, so calculating? I kept asking myself if I had missed the signs, if I'd been blind to her true nature all along. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her ruin everything I'd worked for without a fight. I had to protect what was mine, and I was going to do it no matter what. The more I dug, the clearer it became that Emily wasn't just cheating. I was dealing with a full-blown scheme to take everything from me. I found emails, bank transfers, and even some handwritten notes where she discussed dividing assets with Jason. It was like a blueprint of her plan, and I felt sick just reading it. She was so convinced she could pull this off, that I'd never find out or that I'd just accept her lies. But I wasn't about to be some pawn in her game. I decided to take a bold step. I contacted a private investigator I knew, someone who specialized in financial and infidelity cases. I needed eyes on her, and I needed proof that I could use in court if it came to that. The investigator started tracking her movements, her phone calls, even her meetings. It was unsettling to see her sneaking around, meeting Jason in secret, making plans, and even discussing how to transfer more property. Every piece of evidence was like a dagger to my gut, confirming what I'd suspected all along. During this time, Emily's attitude shifted. She became even more bitchy and manipulative. She'd lash out, accuse me of spying and being paranoid. "You're just jealous," she snapped one day after I confronted her about her secret meetings. "Jason's just a friend and you're overreacting. You're insecure, that's all." Her words stung, but I saw through her act now. It was her way of trying to invalidate me, to make me doubt my own judgment. I knew better. I could see her desperation, her fear of losing everything she was trying to steal. One night, I caught her trying to forge my signature on some documents. I walked into the study and saw her with a pen trying to sign her name on a transfer form. My blood boiled. I immediately confronted her and she froze mid-sign. She tried to brush it off, saying she was just fixing a mistake, but I knew she was lying. That was the moment I realized how far she was willing to go. She wasn't just a cheat. She was a con artist trying to pull off a full-on scam. I decided I had enough. I called my lawyer again and told him everything I'd found. We drafted a legal injunction to freeze all her accounts and prevent her from transferring any assets. I also filed for an emergency hearing to get a court order halting any further property transfers. I was finally taking control. I knew that if I didn't act fast, she'd try to hide or sell off more of our estate, and Jason would swoop in and claim his share. Meanwhile, I kept gathering evidence: voice recordings, emails, bank statements. I wanted to build a case strong enough to destroy her lies and protect what's mine. I also started to secretly prepare myself emotionally. This was no longer just about catching her cheating. It was about fighting for my life's work, my reputation, my future. I felt betrayed, furious, and exhausted all at once, but I also felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't going down without a fight. The real shock came when I discovered that Jason had been pushing her to sign over even more property, things I didn't even know about. He was hungry for a piece of my estate, and Emily was more than happy to help him get it. I realized I'd been blind to how deep this really went. It wasn't just a fling, it was a conspiracy. I had to be smarter, more strategic. I couldn't let her or him walk away with everything I'd built, not without a fight, and I was just getting started. By now, I had enough concrete evidence to make my case bulletproof. I set everything in motion: court orders, legal notices, and a plan to confront Emily and Jason directly. I knew they thought they had the upper hand, that they could keep lying and scheming behind my back. But I wasn't going down without exposing every lie, every manipulation, every dollar they tried to steal. The day filed the court papers was tense. I sat in my lawyer's office, watching as he prepared the legal documents to freeze Emily's accounts and stop any further property transfers. We also filed a motion for a temporary restraining order against Jason, demanding he cease any attempts to claim part of our estate. It felt good to finally be taking control, but I also knew this was just the beginning. They would fight back. I was sure of it. Emily's attitude shifted even more after I took these steps. She became defensive, almost frantic, trying to convince me she'd been truthful all along, that I was overreacting. One evening, I decided to confront her directly. I called her into the living room and laid out everything I'd uncovered. I told her I knew about her affair, her secret accounts, her plans to steal from me, and her attempts to forge my signature. Her face went pale, then red with anger. She tried to deny everything, threw out more lies, saying I was paranoid, that Jason was just a business partner, that I was ruining everything because I was insecure. But I wasn't buying her act anymore. I had the evidence, and I was ready to use it. She broke down crying, claiming she was sorry and that she loved me, that she never meant to hurt me. She begged for forgiveness, saying she was just overwhelmed and made a huge mistake. That's when I finally saw her true colors, the manipulative, bitchy woman who thought she could get away with anything. I realized her tears were just a show, a desperate attempt to keep me from exposing her. I felt a mix of disgust and pity: disgust for what she'd done, and pity because I knew I'd never trust her again. At that point, I made a decision. I told her I couldn't trust her anymore, that she'd betrayed everything we had, and that I was going to fight to protect what's mine. I also told her I was planning to divorce her and take full control of the estate. She argued, begged, even accused me of ruining her life, but I stayed firm. I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, integrity, and self-preservation. I was done playing nice. The aftermath was chaos. Emily tried to spin her lies to friends and family, claiming I was the bad guy, that I was controlling and paranoid. But I had the evidence, and I was prepared to show the court everything. Meanwhile, Jason's claim to half of our estate was based on his manipulations and our joint business dealings, deals I now knew were built on lies and deceit. I felt a mix of anger and relief. Anger because I'd been played, and relief because I was finally taking back control. Looking back, this whole nightmare taught me a lot. Trust is fragile, and sometimes the people closest to us can turn out to be the biggest enemies. I learned that money can bring out the worst in people, especially when greed and betrayal are involved. I also learned that fighting for what's right isn't easy, especially when it feels like the world is against you. But in the end, standing up for yourself, gathering evidence, and fighting legally is the only way to win. I'm still in the process of rebuilding, but one thing for sure: I'll never let anyone take what I've worked for again, especially not a bitchy wife and a scheming partner. Now that everything's out in the open, I've finally started to breathe again. The court case is still ongoing, but I've managed to secure a temporary freeze on Emily's assets. She's furious, trying to spin every story she can to save face, but I know the truth is out. I've seen her desperation, her lies, and her manipulations, and I refuse to let her get away with any of it. Jason's claim to the estate has been challenged, and I've got enough evidence to back up my side. Looking back, I realize just how much I underestimated her. Emily, with her bitchy attitude and constant lying, had been working behind my back for months. She convinced me to sign over property, all the while plotting to take everything I built. She thought she was clever, that her lies would cover everything up, but I was smarter. I learned the hard way that trust can be a dangerous thing if you're not careful. This whole nightmare has changed me. I've become more cautious, more guarded. I don't trust people as easily anymore, especially those who seem too charming or too perfect. I've also learned that fighting for what's right requires patience, a clear head, and a lot of legal muscle. I'm grateful I had the resources and the resolve to stand up to her and Jason. If I hadn't, I genuinely believe they would have taken everything: my money, my property, my future. Most importantly, I've come to accept that sometimes people you love can betray you in ways you never imagined. It's painful, it's confusing, and it's a brutal lesson in human nature. But I also know that I can't let her or Jason define my life. I'm moving forward, rebuilding what I can, and making sure I never let anyone get that close again without truly watching their moves. To anyone reading this, especially if you're in a similar situation, I'd say this: trust is earned, not given blindly. Watch the signs, protect yourself legally, and don't be afraid to fight for what's yours. The truth always comes out eventually, and the people who truly care will respect that. I've lost a lot, but I've gained clarity and strength I didn't know I had. And I'll never let betrayal take me down again.